Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. This is Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square. And joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. This week, Anthony reported on everyone's favorite taxpayer subsidy, and I say that with a huge dose of sarcasm. But apparently it shrunk just a little tiny bit, though that's not going to be the case in the long term, right?
Yeah, so everyone's favorite subsidy, of course, is for Pennsylvania horse racing. The industry, since 2004, has received more than $3.5 billion in taxpayer money. This was basically downstream of a deal worked out in the early 2000s to allow the expansion of legalized gambling in the Commonwealth. The horse racing industry would get a cut of that, which comes from a tax on casino slot machines. But according to a recent analysis from the Independent Fiscal Office, fiscal year 2022-2023, horse racing received just shy of $200 million. So that's about a decline of $8 million from last year. But that probably will not last too long. Looking at the current fiscal year we're sitting in, that dip will be corrected and it will go up to about $220 million, which this flows subsidizes purse prizes of these races, awards programs, horsemen's organizations, top to bottom, connected with Pennsylvania horse racing.
And as our cheeky comments from the top of the show reference, the reason that this fund gets criticized a lot is because it's not doing what it was initially set out to do. And we spend a lot more on it than compared to other programs that seem to have a lot more obvious impact on our economy, right? Will you talk about some of those?
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking at kind of the umbrella that the horse racing subsidies fall under, it's generally connected to economic development projects. When we're looking at similar ones, the redevelopment assistance capital program, which kind of rehabs various buildings and structures, that's $167 million. The Gaming Economic Development and Tourism Fund gets $51 million, and then another $50 million going to the Business in Our Sites program as we develop various businesses. Those are getting beat out by how much we're sending to the horse industry.
It's also kind of an outlier among other states too, right?
Yeah, Pennsylvania is, very few states give more money to this. New York is kind of a prominent example that's beating out Pennsylvania, where recently for the last budget, New York Governor Kathy Hochul proposed sending about $450 million annually to the industry. But then when we're looking at other states like Maryland, I believe Kentucky is the same way, they're generally giving less than $100 million every year. So, we're not the only state that's doing it, but we do stand out dramatically so.
It's interesting. You would think a state like Kentucky would have a lot more taxpayer subsidization of horse racing, considering they're the first place you think of when you look at this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kentucky's done a good job just simply with Kentucky Derby of getting into the public's mind that Kentucky means horse racing and horses. Pennsylvania does not necessarily have that reach. When you look at the industry, it's not just state by state. There's a lot of free flow between, if you're doing something related to horses in Pennsylvania, you may be heading down to Maryland or Kentucky or New York. You have these kind of long range interstate connections. But it's also something I think that gets interesting, and also why the public is so surprised when we talk about just how much money goes to the horse industry in Pennsylvania. The popularity is really declining. When you look at kind of the heyday of this was more 1940s, 1950s, but it's really gotten pushed aside by either other sports or other interests. Generally, even when we're looking at minor league baseball support in Pennsylvania, crowd sizes are bigger for teams like that rather than the average attendance at a horse race in Pennsylvania. So it's one of those industries where its heyday is decades past, but it still has enough connections and enough political heft where it can sustain a very surprising amount of state taxpayer money coming into it.
To keep up with this story and a very deep dive that Anthony did a few months ago about horse racing subsidies, visit thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennin, this is Kristen Smith. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.
Audible is a great way to gain access to an ever-growing selection of audiobooks. They've got what everyone's listening to: bestsellers, new releases, that story you've been waiting for. Follow the link in our show description to get 30 days of Audible free.